Hello everyone, welcome to your first day at South Park School. My name is Mr. Scolarion and I will be teaching you everything you need to know about South Park Phone Destroyer. And in today's lesson, we're going to talk about the swing set. But, of course, a swing set doesn't fit in a classroom, so for this first lesson, we're going to have to go outside. So, now that we're finally outside, we're going to talk about our first lesson, which is called the swing set. So what do I mean with the swing set? Well, first of all, we're going to start by showing you how an actual game usually looks and how it starts out before we get into the details of the swing set. So first off, usually each player puts down their tank. So in this case, we have a case of Adventurer versus Mystic. So each player puts their tank behind their new kid, which is usually a very common start. You start off with a slow unit behind your new kid, and they will slowly push towards the center, and you can build up a nice wave that will eventually fight each other in the middle. So here we see, for Adventure, we see Sheriff Cartman, and for Mystic, we see Zen Cartman. So usually they'll move a little bit forward, and both players will put a ranged unit behind it. So for Mystic, this is Angel Wendy. And of course, for Adventure, you could go for something like Captain Wendy. And after that, they will keep moving to the middle, where they will eventually meet each other. You might put another melee unit next to them. In this case, it's Calamity Heidi for Adventure, or Friar Jimmy for Mystic. And at this point, there's no stopping them. They're gonna fight. So both of the armies or units, they will clash in the middle, and one will come out victorious. Which is, of course, Mystic. God damn it, Mystic. Why do you have to be so broken? But, oh wait, it's Valentine's Day. Cartman and Heidi are a couple. Love always wins. Love wins. Adventure wins. So Adventure is going to go on and it's going to push towards the enemy new kid. So this is where I want you to imagine something like a swing set in the middle of the battleground. So there's a nice little line in the middle of the battleground, which is where I want you to imagine a swing set. You don't actually have to imagine, because I drew one. So this is my beautiful swing set with my beautiful drawing skills. And we're going to imagine that these units that you have left after the clash are going to go onto your swing set. Something like this. I know, it's very beautiful. After this, you're going to add units to this push, and you're going to push your units towards the enemy new kid. So that is you. I know, you're beautiful. So you're going to now push your units towards the enemy. Just like this. So if you push just the right amount, your units will reach the enemy new kid, and you're going to take that first health bar. That's the ideal situation. But what happens if you actually push too hard? If you put down too many units, you will fly way, way, way far into the enemy zone. You will still take the health bar. But what happens after you take the health bar? Your opponent might save on his energy, and you're going to be low on energy, which means he's going to be able to counter push. And this counter push is very hard to stop, because he has all the momentum of his full energy bar, and you've spent too much energy on your push. So this is when his counter push is going to come back, and you're going to be screaming no, believe me. So he's going to add on to his push, and he's going to try and take your health bar. Something you could imagine him building a swing set of his own right now. And he's going to have to do the exact same thing and think about how many units he's going to push with. So you might put down a few units of yourself, but you know, you were down energy because you spent too much energy pushing into the enemy new kid, and your units are going to die. Otherwise, they're going to be hit with the swing set in the head, as you can see by my beautiful drawing. So yeah, you might try to resist. Maybe you have some cost-effective ways to deal with this stuff, but usually, yeah, this is usually what's going to happen if you do overcommit on the push. And eventually, you will see that your new kid is going to take a swing on his health bar, just like the enemy new kid did, and you're going to lose a box as well. So, one thing to consider during all this, this is of course a very easy example. I like to call this the wind. So, of course, you're going to be pushing. Like if you push the swing set, there's going to be resistance from the wind. He's still going to put down troops of his own to try and defend your stuff. So it's a very narrow line between knowing when to retreat, when to keep pushing, how much to commit. But of course, I got a few tips for you on how to recognize when you should keep pushing, and a few things you should just keep in mind when you are pushing after a clash in the middle. So, yeah, this is where you will learn to push just the right amount. So, tip number 1, learn your unit's strength. Of course, there's going to be different themes that are going to be clashing. You're going to have different card levels. You should probably, if you play enough, you should have somewhat of an indication of how strong your units are, what your opponent could be dropping, and just how many units you have to keep putting down to keep the strength at like an equal level, or yours to be slightly above so that your push continues. Also, you need to keep in mind your unit's speed. Now this is important because, for instance, if you're pushing, if you have no assassins left in your hand and your units are already halfway onto the enemy side of the field, it's going to be very rough for your units to go in as a whole and attack the enemy troops that he's defending with at the same time. If you do have assassins though, they're faster units, you can catch up with those, and in general you can just reinforce your troops more steadily like that. Of course, there's also spell cards, which spell cards are the ultimate speed, I like to think of. They don't have to spawn, they don't have to travel. Of course, they have to travel a little bit because of the animation, but usually a fireball is pretty much instant the moment you put it down. So, tip number 3 is learn when to reset. So if you do notice that you don't have the proper cards in your hand to reinforce your push, you might just have to sack the units that have pushed onto the enemy side. They'll do a little bit of damage, but you know pretty much that you're not going to be able to take a health bar, so just reset, wipe the board, have him push into you, make sure your new kid laser will start zapping as soon as they get onto your side, and that's where you start fighting again, and hope that he overcommits to a push, that you'll be able to clean up cost effectively, and that way you can start your own swing set back again. Number 4 is one that is often overlooked, and that is watch your opponent's patterns. So I've noticed that a lot of players have different patterns on how they put down their units. So there's a lot of players that are very meticulous with how they put down their units. They'll put them down one at a time at exactly the right spot. Some players will overcommit on certain units very quickly though on the defense. They'll just put down everything, and you pretty much might be able to abuse them with a spell or any kind of just AoE effect like that. But for the most part, if you do realize that they are putting down units one by one, it could be easier to abuse. There's different variations. It's also you should also keep in mind the cards that you do have in your hand. If you realize that he puts down cards one by one and you have assassins in your hand, that might be a good time to keep pushing in, because you can pick off those units one by one with your assassins. But if he is a player that likes to clump up all his units when he defends, a handful of assassins might not be the best thing to keep pushing with, because the ball will usually just defend itself very cost effectively and deal with your assassins. But if you have a fireball in your hand, you might decide to keep going because he clumps his units, you fireball, you keep going. So that's a pretty neat distinction you can make when you decide to keep pushing or to start retreating. I think, though, the most important tip, number 5, is make mistakes. You're not going to learn unless you make mistakes. If you have a push going, just throw down everything you have. See what happens. If you think you could have gotten the health bar, but you're not completely sure, maybe just try not to add anything. See what happens. And maybe afterwards you realize, oh, if I had put down this unit, I could have pushed again. Or I could have taken a health bar. This can even happen in a game. If you win your first push, you see how he puts down his units, so you watch your opponent's patterns. You maybe decide not to keep pushing because you are scouting out your opponent's patterns. He pushes back in, you defend, then you start pushing again. You know his pattern, and you can abuse it now with the knowledge you had from the previous push. So in theory, it is a little bit of a mistake in-game, maybe, but it's all knowledge-based. It's information you're gaining. It's a little bit of a mistake, but you learn from it. You can adapt in-game and out of game, and you will quickly gain experience and learn how to deal with these situations. So if you keep all these tips in mind from our first lesson, maybe your win percentage will go up just slightly more. Or maybe if you're at the lower ranks where this concept is not usually thought about very much, your win percentage might go up by a lot. So gaining all these little advantages, maybe one day you also could be #1 legend. Hell yeah. You'll have all these people cheering for you, and you finally get that validation that you craved all your life. So with that in mind, well, that's the school bell. School's out. I'll see you guys next time at South Park School. Peace.